Across Canada right now, people are doing something that would have been almost unthinkable a few years ago. They're handing their car keys back and walking away. Not selling, not trading up. Walking away from vehicles they're still paying for. Some are quietly returning leased cars they can no longer afford. Some are letting financed cars get repossessed because the payment finally became impossible. Some are simply parking a vehicle they can't afford to run and pretending, for a while, that the problem isn't there. And these aren't reckless people. That's the part that matters. Many of them are careful, ordinary Canadians who did exactly what the system encouraged them to do. They got a newer, safer, more reliable car on a monthly payment that looked completely manageable at the time. Then life got more expensive, and the payment that once fit their budget became the thing crushing it. So the car, the thing they were told was an asset, a convenience, a normal part of adult life, turned into a trap they're now trying to escape. The reason this is happening tells you something important about the financial state of the average Canadian household in 2026. Stay with me. Let's start with what this looks like, because it takes a few forms. The first is the lease return. Someone leased a vehicle a few years ago at a payment that fit their life. That life changed. Rent rose, a job shifted, costs climbed, and now the payment doesn't fit. Some try to end the lease early and discover the penalties are brutal. Others ride it out, hand the car back at the end, and refuse to lease again because they can't stomach another payment. The second is voluntary surrender. People handing a financed car back to the lender because they genuinely can't keep paying. It feels like a solution. It usually isn't, and we'll get to why. The third is straightforward repossession. The payment stops, and eventually the car is taken. And the fourth is the quiet one that's hardest to count. People who still technically have the car, but have stopped maintaining it, stopped insuring it properly, or parked it because they can't afford the fuel. The car is still in the driveway, but functionally, they've already given up on it. All four are symptoms of the same thing. Canadians took on car debt when times were one way, and times became another. To understand why this is happening now, you have to understand how the payment was built, because a lot of these arrangements were fragile from the start. Remember what we covered about vehicle prices. Cars got expensive. To keep the monthly payment looking affordable on an expensive car, the industry stretched the loans longer and leaned hard on leasing, which lowers the monthly number by only charging you for part of the car's value. Both tools do the same thing. They make an expensive vehicle feel affordable by focusing your attention on a small monthly number instead of the enormous total. And when money was cheap and life was stable, that worked well enough. But it built in fragility. A long loan or a lease optimized for the lowest possible monthly payment has no slack in it. There's no cushion. It was calculated to fit a budget exactly as that budget was on the day it was signed, which means the moment that budget tightens even slightly, the payment doesn't fit anymore. Millions of Canadians signed arrangements that were affordable only as long as absolutely nothing went wrong. And in 2026, for a lot of households, plenty went wrong. The first reason the payments broke is everything we've covered on this channel, landing all at once. The car payment didn't change. Everything around it did. Rent went up, mortgage renewals landed at higher rates, groceries climbed, insurance climbed, including the insurance on the car itself. Home heating through a Canadian winter got more expensive. So the household budget that comfortably contained a car payment 2 or 3 years ago got squeezed from every other direction, until the car payment, unchanged, but now competing with much bigger bills, became the thing that no longer fit. And here's the cruel ranking of priorities that happens under pressure. When money gets tight, people pay for shelter first, then food, then whatever keeps the lights on. The car, for a lot of people, ends up near the bottom of that list, right up until they realize that in most of Canada, losing the car means losing the ability to get to work, which means losing the income that pays for everything else. So people cling to the car far longer than they should, sacrificing other things, until they simply can't. The second reason is the trap that makes escape so hard, and it's the piece most people don't understand until they're caught in it. It's called negative equity, and it means owing more on the car than the car is worth. Here's how ordinary people fall into it. Cars lose value quickly, especially in the first years. But a long loan is paid down slowly. So for a long stretch, the car's value drops faster than the loan balance does. And during that whole period, you owe more than you could sell it for. Now watch how that becomes a trap. Say you're struggling with the payment and you think, I'll just sell it and get something cheaper. You can't, because selling it wouldn't clear the loan, so you'd hand over the car and still owe money. You'd be paying for a car you no longer have. Fine, I'll hand it back to the lender. But a voluntary surrender or repossession usually doesn't erase the debt either. The lender sells the car, often at a low auction price, and comes after you for the difference, plus fees. So people who hand the keys back thinking they've solved the problem discover they still owe thousands on a car sitting in someone else's lot. That's the trap. Every exit, sell, surrender, default, can leave you owing money on a vehicle you no longer have. It's a financial hole with the ladder pulled up. But here's the real reason Canadians are abandoning their cars, the shocking one underneath the mechanics. The average Canadian household has run completely out of slack. Slack is the buffer. It's the small amount of room in a budget that absorbs the unexpected, the surprise bill, the reduced hours, the price that jumped. A healthy household has slack. It's what lets you take a small hit without everything collapsing. What's happened across Canada is that housing costs, inflation, and stagnant wages have eaten the slack out of millions of household budgets entirely. People aren't living below their means with a cushion. They're living exactly at the edge, with every dollar committed before it arrives, and nothing held back for when something goes wrong. And a budget with no slack is a budget that breaks at the first shock. The car payment isn't unaffordable because the car got more expensive. It didn't. It's unaffordable because the household lost the buffer that used to absorb life's small disasters. The abandoned car isn't a car problem. It's the most visible sign that an entire population is living without a financial cushion of any kind. That's why this is happening to careful people, not just reckless ones. You can budget perfectly and still break if you have no margin, because perfect budgeting with zero slack means one bad month ends you. And a great many Canadians are exactly one bad month from the edge, all the time. Let me make it real. Picture a family in a Canadian suburb. A couple of years ago, they leased a reliable SUV. They weren't being flashy. They had kids, they needed something safe and dependable, and the payment fit their budget with a little room to spare. It was, by any reasonable standard, a responsible decision. Then the mortgage renewed higher. Then a round of grocery inflation hit. Then one of them had their hours cut back at work. None of it was catastrophic on its own. Together, it ate every dollar of room they had. For months they juggled. They cut other things first, the small pleasures, then the bigger ones. They fell behind, caught up, fell behind again. They did everything right, and it still didn't work, because there simply wasn't enough money to cover a life that had gotten more expensive on an income that hadn't. Eventually they sat down and understood there was no version of the month that included that car payment. So they handed it back. And then they got the letter explaining that because of the way the lease and the vehicle's value worked out, they still owed money on a car that was no longer in their driveway. They didn't fail. They got caught in a system that was fragile by design, in an economy that removed their margin for error. And they're far from alone. And here's why this matters far beyond the people it's happening to. Car debt is one of the most sensitive early warning indicators of household financial stress there is. It sits above rent and food in the sacrifice order, but below almost nothing else. So when people start defaulting on cars in large numbers, it means they've already cut everything cuttable. The car is one of the last things to go. Losing it means the earlier defenses are already gone. So a rise in people abandoning vehicles isn't a car market story. It's a flashing light on the dashboard of the whole economy, telling you that household finances have deteriorated to the point where people are surrendering things they genuinely need. And there are knock-on effects. A flood of surrendered and repossessed vehicles hits the used market, which affects used prices. Lenders who wrote a lot of long, thin auto loans face rising losses, and a growing number of Canadians end up with damaged credit and lingering debt on cars they no longer have, which makes their financial recovery slower and harder and keeps them stuck. And this connects to everything else on this channel. The unsold trucks were about people who couldn't afford to buy. The abandoned boats were about people who couldn't afford to keep a luxury. The abandoned cars are the darkest version yet. People who can't afford to keep a necessity they already committed to. Notice the progression. First, people stop buying the extras. Then they abandon the luxuries. Now they're surrendering the essentials, the car they need to get to the job that pays for everything else. That's the sequence of a household running out of room, and Canada is visibly moving down it. The abandoned car in the driveway and the voluntary surrender letter on the kitchen table are the same story as the empty condo and the shuttered shop, told one household at a time. It's the story of a country where ordinary people have no financial breathing room left, and where the systems that were supposed to make life affordable, like easy car financing, turned out to be traps that made the fall harder. So where does this go? For the individual, the honest advice is unglamorous. Understand negative equity before you ever sign. Keep loan terms as short as you can bear, and treat a low monthly payment on a long term as the warning sign it often is, rather than the deal it looks like. None of that helps the people already caught, but it might spare the next person. And it's genuinely not financial advice, just the pattern this channel keeps seeing. For the country, it's the same answer as always. Households need slack, and slack comes from wages that match the cost of living, and housing costs that don't consume everything. Until Canadians have a cushion again, the smallest shock will keep knocking things over, starting with the car, because the car is where the fall becomes visible. Which leaves the question this channel keeps arriving at. What happens to a country when its people are all living one bad month from the edge? So I want to hear from you. Have you had to give up a vehicle you were paying for? And what pushed you to it? Are you caught in a car loan that no longer fits your life? Did you learn about negative equity the hard way? And do you think this is going to get worse before it gets better? Tell me in the comments below. Keep it honest, no judgment here. This is happening to careful people everywhere. I read every one. And if you want clear-eyed breakdowns of what's really happening across Canada, subscribe to Canada Insider. There's a lot more of this story to tell.